Well, welcome back to the One Another podcast. I'm your host, Josh Squires, and joining me as always is my co-host, Josh Fleming. Once again, down the hall from me, Fleming, good to have you.
Oh, it's great to be here, Josh. Excited about today's conversation.
And our speaker for this week is Dr. Hall. Dr. David Hall, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
Thank you. Glad to be with you. I think the only one we're missing is Josh Holmes, and we could do the Ruthless podcast.
Yes.
That'd be fun.
Well, and we've had people tell us we should rename our podcast to Just Joshing Around. And if he were here, that would make it even more complete.
Sometimes we make our guests a honorary Josh, depending on how they do on the podcast, Dr. Hall. So just,
I'll work
have that in mind. Yeah. Well, to kick us off, one of the things we like to do, we're so excited to have you here and be here with us at First Pres here in Columbia to deliver our summer lecture, to preach with us. One of the things we've realized, though, is over the years, we have these great speakers coming in through the summer. And it's such a blessing to our congregation, but often we don't really get to know the man who's delivering. They're kind of in and out, it's a whirlwind here in Columbia. We'd love just to get to know you a little bit, hear a little bit about your story, how you came to know the Lord, how you entered ministry, just some of your biographical information.
Sure. My wife and my wife's maiden name, by the way, was Fleming.
Oh,
So she can't be a Josh, but she can be a Fleming. And
where is she from?
We both grew up in Memphis, Tennessee.
Oh, okay. Well, probably know.
West Tennessee. I grew up in the Methodist Church. It was during that sort of pre-Vietnam era, baby boomer, typical middle class growing up. My parents took me to church. I was not a believer. I became a believer in 1972 as in part of the Jesus movement. Went home and told my mom I had become a Christian. She said, "No, you haven't. You always have been one because you were baptized as a Methodist or christened as a Methodist." I said, "No, mom. I'm telling you, you don't know everything, and you don't want to know everything." But so I became a Christian in a non-denominational house church in 1972. Went to a big campus crusade event. That summer, Campus Crusade hosted this thing called Explo 72. Which was a huge event. Billy Graham spoke, Josh McDowell, probably the earliest contemporary Christian musician, Andre Crouch, who was none of you guys weren't even alive back then. But it was a big turning point. I entered college in a local school, University of Memphis, and went through the charismatic movement. Was a dispensationalist because I didn't know anything else. When I went to seminary, I even took my Schofield Bible, and that was the only one I knew. And I met Ann in 1975, and she was a new Christian. She had been led to Christ through a guy I was discipling. And she and Ed, our friend, were buddies, and he was a very young Christian, didn't know what he was doing. And she would ask him questions, and he'd say, "I don't know, let me get back to you." So finally, Ed brought Ann to a lunch Bible study, and then we ditched Ed. So
Wise man.
we both graduated from high school in 1973.
Wow.
And she just was a blank slate as far as the Bible, and started reading the Bible and loved it. And probably still to this day, I'm a little embarrassed to say, but it's true. She's the best Bible student in our home. So I was Methodist. She was Catholic. I went to L'Abri in early 1976, and that was where I was really sort of exposed to Reformed theology and Covenant Seminary, where I went. So in 1976 fall, I entered Covenant Seminary in St. Louis, and went there and graduated. So that's a little of our background. I'll share a little bit more of it maybe in my sermon, so I don't want to go there too much. People will tune out anyway. After graduation in 1980, I was ordained in the Southern Presbyterian Church in the PCUS in a small town north of here, about an hour, Rome, Georgia. So I went and served at First Pres, Rome, Georgia. And while I was there, interestingly, in 1982, I was ordained in the PCUS, Southern Presbyterian Church, because I wasn't really I really just wasn't a Calvinist. I wasn't Reformed, so I couldn't go into the RPCES or the PCA at that time. I'm a slow learner, and it took me a long time to come around. The Methodism and the Arminianism really had to be washed out of me over a period of years. And in Rome, in 1982, that church left the Southern Presbyterian Church and joined the EPC. And we hosted the first Presbyterian meeting of the Southern Presbyterian of the EPC there in 1982.
Wow.
One of your church's former pastors, this goes way back, Hugh McClure, was a friend of the senior pastor I worked with. And I know First Pres was considering its options about that time. And then, of course, First Pres, your church, your First Pres went into the ARP, but we were in the EPC. And then a few years later, I accepted a call to pastor a church in East Tennessee, in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, outside of Knoxville, which is a big scientific community. And we were there for 20 years. So I had one little baby when we moved up there. My oldest, by the way, both of my daughters, and I'll say this, I want you to know, we have a huge fondness for First Pres Columbia because both of my daughters went to the University of South Carolina. And they lived in Maxey and walked about 3 blocks to church. When my oldest, Megan, was there, Dick DeWitt was the pastor. And I knew Dick from Memphis.
Gotcha.
He was always very, very kind and supportive of my work. And then, of course, Sinclair became the pastor while they were still there. So we just have great fondness experiences. I've come to know Mark Ross pretty well over the years, and have known Derek over the years, and of course Neil is a good friend.
So at some point in this story, you became Dr. Hall. When did that happen?
That happened that's a fun story. That happened toward the end of my time in Oak Ridge. Let me see if I can get the years right. I'll get them close. I had done some writing, some speaking, some conferencing in the late 90s in the intersection of church and state and political things. And in the Lord's providence, this is a wonderful providence. I'm glad you asked me about that. This is a great story. I spoke at a conference in Philadelphia sometime in the late 90s. A wonderful, wonderful lady heard my presentation and liked it. She happened to have been in the Reagan administration and was the ambassador to Switzerland twice.
Wow.
Under Ronald Reagan. Wow. And with the intervening period, she was the first director of the religious liaison to the religious office in 1983. So she's in Switzerland, an ambassador back in Washington. Her name is Faith Whittlesey. She died about 2 years ago. Anyway, she heard this talk and sort of liked it. And Faith, if I can use a Southernism, bless her heart, she said, "This is what my grandmother, who was a New England Puritan, always taught me, and I want you to craft this story, and would you be interested in writing a book?" And I said, "Well, yeah." So long story short, she arranged for me to have a grant to write a book that is entitled The Genevan Reformation and the American Founding, which was, the grant was sponsored by a secular think tank in California, the Claremont Institute.
Wow.
And at the time, by the way, if you know this name, the president of the Claremont Institute was Larry Arnn, who's since gone on to be the president of Hillsdale University in Michigan. And Larry was going as I was coming. And so that enabled us to do a grant. It paid for my whole family of 5 to go to Geneva for a summer.
Wow.
We get to do research, all paid for by a secular think tank. And my only requirement was that you let me tell the story as I research it.
Yeah.
And there were some tension points from time to time because it's a very Lockean, not neocon, but anyway, long story short, a different strain. But they allowed me to tell my story, and that later that was an easy. I have a very cheap, crummy doctorate that enabled me to do my own research, and did that, and that was the doctoral program. So we were in Geneva in the late 90s, worked on the book for about 2 years, and really wanted to finish both that and the doctoral program before we moved here in 2003.
Wow.
And so those were sort of some of the ending chapters of our time in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So we finished the book manuscript. It was published by Lexington Press. Michael Novak gave it a very nice endorsement. So that's my work on that. To be honest, I can't even remember the long title of the dissertation, but it's something like the Calvinistic political tradition, 1530 to 1570. And it mainly, although it deals with Calvin, it mainly deals, I think the contribution the book makes is that it explains and highlights Calvin's disciples who actually did much more work in political theory than Calvin himself.
That's amazing. Speaking of Calvin and other thinkers, we're asking our speakers to maybe give us a little bit of a preview of who they're coming to talk about. Don't have to give too much away here, especially knowing that you're going to talk for 45 minutes to us. But who are you bringing to us, and why this particular person?
Yeah, when Neil first contacted me, I asked if I could do Calvin. I figured everybody else would, and I got there first. So I'm going to be talking about the Calvin you don't know, and we'll try to bring to the listening audience some aspects of Calvin's life that are not that well known. I mean, he's such an ultimate bad guy. When you ask people in modern society, tell me. I mean, he's top 4 or 5 bad guy, up there with Hitler,
Wow,
Stalin, Trump, for some people. Mussolini and Calvin. It's just like these ultimate bad guys. And as a historian or as just an honest thinker, you wonder, well, how, if he was such a bad guy, how did he generate such a movement? Which I think is an honest, simple question.
Yeah.
And it's answered fairly easily that maybe he wasn't such a bad guy.
Right.
And
Right.
He actually had friends. I'll talk a little bit about the friendship of Calvin. He actually cared for the poor, which he's not given much credit for. He was a philanthropic donor, and he was massive in the printing industry. And of course, one of his lasting contributions is through his disciples. He really was a shaper of the American Republic. I just released a little book trying to get out front of the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence next year, a couple weeks ago, called Declaring Independence, Revealing Dependence, where I just pulled together some of the work from that book. And it's a short, simple thing that shows that Calvin really had an enormous shadow that cast across the Atlantic Ocean, through New England, into the Tidewater area, in the Low Countries. The Huguenot Church, for example, in Charleston, still has a plaque on its wall to Theodore Beza, who's Calvin's lieutenant.
Wow.
It's very unusual.
Wow.
So I'll try to humanize. I'll try to rehabilitate Calvin's image.
So when you were in Geneva, do people in Geneva look at Calvin as a bad guy? Do they see him?
Yes. Oh yeah, they hate Calvin.
Interesting.
They hate Calvin. Yeah, even in the 90s when we were there, and then we led in, and we had Sinclair was one of our speakers. Let's see who else that you know. Derek Thomas in Calvin 500 in 2009.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ian Hamilton.
Yeah.
No, Ian wasn't a speaker. I forget. Ligon Duncan, Derek Thomas.
Yeah.
We just had the greatest preachers preaching in Calvin's pulpit, which, by the way, back to Faith Whittlesey, she helped to make that happen.
Wow.
And hooked me up with some leaders there. It was an amazing, uncommon feat to get access to St. Pierre Cathedral for a week to celebrate that. And we had some great preachers, but we found people despised Calvin in Geneva and lionized Servetus.
Wow.
So
Now,
the Genevans loved Servetus, and in Genevans' mind, Servetus was the hero because he was sort of a libertarian. So Servetus and then later Jean-Jacques Rousseau are heroes, and Calvin is the bad guy. There's very, very little Calvinistic community or witness in Geneva today.
so just for anybody who's listening to this who's just unfamiliar, can you briefly just say again, not to take anything away from a future talk, but Servetus, who was he?
Servetus was a Socinian, which is a descendant of Arianism. If you're studying the Nicene Creed this year, a forerunner to Unitarians, and he came to Geneva and was found to be guilty of disturbing the peace by the city council, not by the church, by the city council, and burned at the stake. So Calvin gets blamed for that. Calvin actually, on occasion, pled for mercy and wasn't a part of that. It was the civil government, but they thought Servetus was such a dangerous hombre that they burned him at the stake. Wow. So he's gone down in Genevan lore, and in Western civilization, urban legend is sort of the man who's raging against the machine. And poor little Servetus. Well, he was a very difficult character. And he ended up in Geneva because he had been exiled from numerous other places. But it's a sad story. I probably won't be telling this part, but it's a sad story of Calvinism that it was so strong, so influential, so shaping for all of Western Europe, and then in the colonies in the New World. But then it lost. Within about 250 years of Calvin's death, it lost that influence of Calvin almost entirely. Geneva is a very secular place today, and the churches there are largely very liberal.
That's sad to hear.
It's something interesting about human culture. We often, like you say, villainize those who have really contributed a lot, not even just to sort of the religious institutions, but even the cultural institutions that we formed, that we benefit. These people who we stand on their shoulders, we later look back at, culturally and find all the things. And of course, we don't want to whitewash anyone, but we often find every little thing they did wrong, and that we can sort of go back and crucify them for.
Yeah, and it's so very convenient, easy to find fault with our great grandparents who can't defend themselves.
That's right.
And not only is that, I think, wrongly motivated, but it's also an expression of pride and arrogance. We really think we are better. We tell ourselves, well, I would never fall for racism, or I would never fall for any kind of hierarchicalism, and we tell ourselves that we're so sanctified and glorified that we would never fall for these mistakes, but every generation does, and no doubt our grandchildren will be tempted to look back on us and go, yeah, Pop didn't do a very good job on that.
There's sort of a Hegelian tendency to say, well, everything's better, everything's progressing, we're more advanced, we see things more clearly now than anyone else did before us, and so it's easy to look back on anything they do differently, or they did differently, or the way they thought or acted, and just crush them. So, yeah.
Right.
You mentioned your little book that just recently came out as a result of some of the research that you've done. About Calvin's influence on our founding as a country. Does Witherspoon play any factor in that?
He was big. I don't think I'd drawn him very much. I mean, it's a 100-page book. It's small. And it mainly deals with founding documents, state charters, Declaration of Self, Federalist Papers, Constitution, with the prehistory leading up to that. But John Witherspoon was a huge influence as president of Princeton during the founding era, and he trained a number of people who became very influential statesmen. And he brought with him a very strong Knoxian Presbyterianism, which
And
I think shows.
for our people, they may not know, and I think Witherspoon was
Mhm.
referenced by Dr. Hamilton as well. I forget if it
That's
was
right.
during his lecture or during the sermon
Hmm.
itself,
It was his
but
lecture. Yeah.
it was his lecture. John Witherspoon's grandson, also named John Witherspoon, was one of our early ministers here at First Pres
Is
Columbia.
that right?
Yep,
Hmm.
yep.
Wonderful.
I think he was like the third or fourth minister that we had here was John Witherspoon. So.
Wow. Good to know. I did not know that.
Well, Dr. Hall, I wonder if we could transition now, and we've had a question we've been asking all of our speakers. It's sort of you take this any direction you like. It can be funny, it can be serious. But the question is, if you could have any writer from any time in history, non-inspired author, so not one of our writers of scripture, but any author on any subject, which author would you pick on, and which subject would you have them write on? And why would you pick that?
Well, can I rephrase it? Who would I like to have dinner with, or have a
Oh,
drink and a
sure.
cigar
Sure,
with?
sure.
Uh, I'm going to answer for my wife. She has a crush on Charles Spurgeon,
Mm.
Okay.
and I'm pretty sure when we get to heaven, um, to follow the Matthew 22 analogy of whose wife is she, she may ditch me, um, and for good reason. But Spurgeon wouldn't be who I would choose. I'm not going to say Calvin because I might choose Calvin's Lieutenant Theodore Beza,
Mm.
Mm,
who is again another unknown or lesser known. By the way, the people in Geneva like Beza. They think he was kind of a cool dude because he was a poet.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating because in the West, in the around Protestant scholastic theology, Beza is one of the ultimate bad guys. So
Mm.
it's just kind of
mm,
interesting where you go. But Theodore Beza was a giant. He lived a long time. He succeeded Calvin. He kept the movement going. He was an incredibly erudite
Mm.
man, and I'd like to sit down with him. But I'd probably rather talk to Luther. I'd like to talk to
Mm.
Martin Luther. I think he'd be a fun guy.
Yeah.
He would tell some stories, and I think Luther would be who I'd like to talk to, and
mhm.
Beza as a number two.
Yeah.
There
Very
you go.
different personalities, it seems. Luther would be so more charismatic. You would expect
Yeah, yeah,
something to
yeah.
happen during that dinner that you would laugh about and
That's
remember
right.
for a long time.
Yeah, Luther's who I kind of want to be, not as I grow up, but as I grow older. He's just
Mm,
kind of an old guy. He's got stories. He tells things, and he was witty, but he wrote extensively too. I think
Yeah.
people
mhm.
sometimes focus on tabletop, but Luther was a very competent theologian.
Yeah.
But I'd be hard pressed whether Luther or Beza. Beza because he's lesser known.
Mm.
And as I said, the Genevans loved him. In fact, there's still an annual tradition called the Escalade, where they celebrate Beza leading the Genevans to withstand the Duke of Savoy and
Huh.
protected Geneva in the late
Wow.
1590s.
Wow.
So he's sort of still a hero.
Mm.
Wow.
And if you got to have, say, lunch with Beza, dinner with Luther, is there a particular topic or question you would want to ask them or hear them talk about?
Uh, you know, I think with Luther, I think I'd want to talk to Luther and say, Luther, Martin, do you really hate Jews?
Mm.
Mm,
Because
Mm.
you said some very hard things about them, and
Yeah.
do you understand where that went?
Yeah. Yeah.
What
mm.
that led to in the 20th century and
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the Nazi socialism, and would you like to maybe do a retraction and to have a
Right.
new edition where you clarify?
Yeah.
With Beza, I think I'd say I'd want to ask Beza this because Beza, I'm convinced Beza made an epic shift in political theory in 1572,
Mm.
8 years after Calvin's death. He made an epic shift that the Americans picked up on, and the Scots before that, in calling for resistance against the government.
Mm.
Mm,
And even Calvin carrying on the medieval tradition. There were people before Calvin who had that idea, but nobody talked about it. I mean, the world is a totally monarchical world
Yeah.
in, say, 1520.
Yeah.
Pick here. The bondage of the will when Luther. There was a totally monarchical world, except for a little city-state of Venice, a couple of things. And the Swiss city-states were some of the earliest to form small republics. But it wasn't a big movement, which we grow up breathing that oxygen. We know that. And so even when Calvin died, there were some principles, some seeds that would lead to the founding of republics and democratic government, but they were in no way fleshed out. And the Christian tradition was thoroughly committed to monarchy at that time. Basic comes along a short period later, and really starts writing in radical ways compared to the tradition. And all of a sudden, there are a bunch of political tracts in the 1570s that reflect this, that I think are drawn upon and the basis for Western democracies. And I think I know why Basic brought that change. It was an exegetical change, but I think it was really impacted by a historical event, the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in Paris in 1572. And that's a case where, but I'd like to ask him, I'd like to ask Theodore Basic, I'd like to, Teddy, tell me, is this why you really changed your mind? Did your mind change? And because we are the recipients, we're the heirs of some amazing political theories upon which Western civilization is based. And there's a clear, in history, there's a clear before after. There's a demarcation line. And something changed. And it was the exegesis that submission is not unlimited. And there was a very famous American sermon in 1750 by Jonathan Mayhew entitled, "Is Submission Unlimited?" And that was radical for the day. And Mayhew, by the way, was an anti-Calvinist. He was almost a Unitarian in New England. But he took that, what I call a Calvinistic idea. There simply was not, before the 1570s, that idea was just not popularized. And it took over, and it's interesting to study history and to see when these movements reach critical mass, when things change, and we have to be careful to not over-assign cause and effect. On the other hand, there are clear before and afters. And if you go further in history, one of those tilting points came in England at the Westminster Assembly. The Puritans had been preaching what we call Presbyterian ecclesiology for 50, 60 years, and they were taking over the countryside. They were taking over the movement and nearly toppled, and did for a short interim, for 20 years, toppled the Anglican church and state. And so the Puritans had to be put back in their place by the Brits. But those events don't just happen. I mean, today we could talk among ourselves, and we could probably identify things in the last 50 years or so that had become norms that weren't 50 years earlier.
Right.
And something has to change and aggregate, and to keep these movements going. And Calvinism was one of those very potent movements. So again, I come back to this: if it had such wrong ideas and was led by such an evil person, how come the three of us are talking?
Right.
How come your producer's named Calvin? If this is all so bad, you know what I mean? I really. When was the last time you baptized a baby named Adolf? I'm not going to touch that one. Right. So, there were great contributions by Calvin, and we should, I think, be humble enough to receive those and appreciate those, without at the same time, we don't ask John Calvin into our hearts.
Right.
We don't follow him. We may here again, we're free to criticize Calvin. And say, I wouldn't do it that way.
So, Dr. Hall, kind of the last question we've been asking our speakers from your unique vantage point, historian, especially one who has thought through politics and theology and the influence there, ministered for, gosh, if I got your timeline correctly, you've been ministering for 40 plus years, maybe 50 years. Um,
Three or 400 years. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, So what is an issue that you see, and this can be like distant horizon, or it can be something maybe a little bit more imminent, that the church, and you're free to define that however you will, if it's particular to us, the Reformed movement, or a particular, First Pres Columbia, or if it's just the church militant in general, just an issue you see out there on the horizon, and how should we be preparing for it?
Yeah, I was asked a similar question about 4 or 5 years ago at a conference in Grand Rapids with Joel Beakey, and it was on a panel, and um, the panel gave all kind of different ideas. They talked about critical race theory and
Mm,
how challenging that was, and I just sort of scratched my head and thought, this is not where I live.
mm,
Where I live, and I've been a pastor since 1980. The Lord has allowed me in His providence to do some other things, to do some writing, to do some conferencing.
mhm,
Um, but I'm a pastor at a local parish. I'll be visiting the hospital later this afternoon, like a
Mm.
typical normal pastor does. Um, and my answer to the question then, I'll modify slightly. My answer to the question that time, that was right after COVID, was I was very concerned that you just have to search the whole world to find a group of Christians who will actually get along and submit to one another.
mm,
Mm.
mm,
And I think our ethos of independence in America may
Mhm.
kill the church.
mm,
So to
Mm.
me, the biggest problem is not pornography, evil though that is, not critical race theory,
mhm,
um, not on the other side of that Christian nationalism. I think the biggest threat to the church, the seed that I think Satan has sown most effectively,
mm,
is that you can hardly find an American Christian who will say, if my church chooses to do something other than me,
mhm.
I'm going to live with it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Instead, what we normally say, the reflex of American evangelicalism is, I'm right, the rest
Yeah.
of the church is wrong.
Yeah.
Mm.
And to put a point on that, I think one of the most troubling things that I've seen is the rise of what I call the abuse industry,
Mm,
where uh, everybody's pastor is abusive.
mm,
Well, this is analogous to what I'll be saying about Calvin. No, everybody's pastor's not abusive.
mm,
Every father's not abusive. Sometimes
Mm.
fathers and grandfathers have to say, no,
mhm,
sweetheart, you can't do that. And no, lad, I'm going to take your car keys away.
mhm,
Well, that's labeled as abuse.
mm,
It's not abuse. And we have people going around, and anytime people don't get their way, and I'm talking Reformed, Presbyterian Church, PCA, ARP,
mm,
anytime some strong individual doesn't get his or her way, and they have time on their hands and a pretty good intellect, which most Presbyterians do, they're going to go after somebody and attack the church or attack the pastor.
mm,
Mm.
And it's an evil dynamic that I think is rooted in that pride, in that self-centeredness that says, I know better than everybody else. And if you
mm.
don't give me what I want, I'm entitled.
Yeah.
I therefore am a victim, and you are an abuser.
Mm,
And
Mm.
it's really hurting churches.
mm,
We've spent a lot of time, my whole staff and I have spent a whole lot of time counseling with other pastors who've been accused of abuse and falsely accused,
mm,
slandered, and then with social media attacked. It's a very hideous
mm,
uh, dynamic in our society today. So
mm.
Mm.
Have
protect
you
your pastors.
have you seen an increase in this since COVID, or do you think this is just a trajectory line that's just been pretty
Yeah,
even?
I think it's probably a little bit more tied to the Me Too movement,
Okay.
which
Mm.
predated COVID by a couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Mhm.
yeah, so I don't know that COVID was another thing that where and the church will be recovering for 50 years
Yeah.
over that, just like education will. When kids miss 2 or 3 key grades,
Yeah.
you don't recover in a hurry.
Yeah.
And we allowed people to, and we were all dealing with the best we could. No
Yeah.
seminary prepared a pastor to deal with
Yeah.
COVID,
Yeah.
but we allowed people to opt for digital spirituality
Yeah.
remotely instead of in gathered communities. Our church was very blessed, by the way. We had a governor like yours who was commonsensical, and our church was only closed for worship services 7 weeks,
Yeah.
which seemed like an eternity. The
Yeah.
reason we were able to open sooner than most was because of the state we were in, our governor,
Yeah.
and because we had a large enough sanctuary that we could socially distance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I remember talking to our elders, and this is one of the places where I can tell a story now. I disagreed strongly with my elders, and I was just heartbroken that we closed for 1 week. I live in walking distance of the church, and I said, I'll preach to 7 people, but let's don't close the doors. That's an improper bowing to the state, and we shouldn't have done it. And I was overruled by my elders, and had full opportunity to present my case. I did that, and then these are fine men. Again, it was a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
So I don't in any way mean to imply that I was superior and they were bad.
Yeah.
But I remember looking back on it. How long were you guys closed?
Guys, I was just thinking about that. I think we were March and we were back in June. So April,
Probably 3
May.
months.
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
Yeah. Which was rapid compared to
Rapid
national
compared
norms.
to pretty much everywhere else. Yeah.
And the states of Georgia, Florida, Texas, and South Carolina
Yeah.
allowed their churches to be opened first.
When we went through COVID, and I'm sure you saw this too, we saw members, and not just our church, just other churches in our denomination or other Reformed churches, where you had families that were generational families. We had been at this church for 100 years, 150 years, and they left because of a decision, and not just like open close, but a like distance, not distance,
Right.
mask, not mask. Whatever the decisions were, you weren't going to appease everybody. And people were leaving and breaking generational bonds over those level of decisions. And so I asked a leader whose name he doesn't want me to share, but people would recognize relatively quickly. I asked him, I said, if you had told me 3 years before COVID that the issue that was going to drive change in the church, people to leave their church, was going to be race relations, or it was going to be sex and sexuality, transgenderism, any of those things, I would have said, yes, I can see that coming. But if you had told me it was masks, no masks, or whatever, I wouldn't have seen it coming. What did I miss? And his insightful answer was hospitality. We weren't getting people to do hospitality enough so that they could be around people who didn't think exactly like them, and therefore have a tolerance for decisions and thinking processes that weren't exactly like they are. That as we go online, as we're more of a digital presence, we can curate our entire existence with people who think exactly like we do, and so I have a very thin tolerance for anyone who thinks like that thinks other than the way that I think.
Yeah, I think that's a part of what troubles me. I think that's the issue that I think is bad. The segregation of communities with online presence. And we approached this as much as we could. We said, this is a matter of Christian liberty. You can wear a mask or not wear a mask.
Yeah.
But you're right, though, either side. My daughter's church in Chattanooga, they had people who would not come because they wore masks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a tough period. I think a lot of pastors really did suffer.
Yeah.
And here again, if you want to write a book on abuse, and I have a friend who is doing that, I think, to answer some of the other poor books that allege pastoral abuse, a lot of pastors really had very difficult times, and they had congregations coming at them from both sides. People in California, for example, had to meet outside in tents for years.
Yeah.
And that state was much more difficult. So we're blessed, and I just want to say again how thankful I am, very humbled to be able to come and visit you, and our family has a great debt to the congregation at First Pres. They received our daughters and were wonderful, not because they knew that I was a pastor, but just that hospitality to the university community is a great hallmark of your church, and never underestimate how thankful many of us are for that, and for so many of the excellencies of your ministry.
Well, we're flattered to have you, Dr. Hall. Seriously, we thank you for taking the time. And I know all the prep that goes into stuff like this. So thank you so much for what I know will be a good shepherding of our people. Now, if people want to know more or hear more from you, Dr. Hall, where might they find more if they want to listen to sermons or read books, or where can they find content from you?
Oh, thanks for asking. I started this year a project. I have a Substack 6 days a week, not on the Lord's Day, called Cheering Folly's Demise.
Okay.
So there's a Substack. You can find it, Cheering Folly's Demise, or look for that. And I do pretty much a daily commentary on a lot of subjects, a lot of politics. I just had to do this in the first 60 days of the Trump administration because, man, everything was happening. It was so fast. The press couldn't keep up. And my typical greeting to my wife when I come home from work was, "Oh, what happened today?" And there were several things. So I've attempted, the handle's actually Reformed Politics, Substack.Reformed Politics. So I have some commentary, but today's article is on a girl trip we took our granddaughters on last week. So it allows me to write. I do some book reviews. I do some cultural commentary, a lot of politics. So Cheering Folly's Demise, if somebody wants to read that. And my books are all on Amazon.
We are looking forward to having you here. Yeah.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
It'll be a nice, cool. It'll be a cool weekend, as we talked earlier.
That's right.
That's cool right. 150 degrees and 1,000% humidity. So, it'll be a nice break. Well, for Josh Fleming and Dr. Hall, I'm Josh Squires. Thank you so much for joining us this week, and we look forward to seeing you next week with next week's speaker. And until then, God bless.